Welcome to the Sunday morning worship service here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Doug Coker-Count, and I'm a member of your Board of Trustees. Unitarian Universalism is a faith tradition committed to creating a just and flourishing world for all people. Our Universalist theology tells us that every person is worthy of love. Thus, when we say, whoever you are, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. This is our message of love to you, inviting your whole self into this space to help us co-create a world centered on our values. We invite you to learn more about us and consider joining this community to enact our values of equity, justice, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. I would like to invite Laura Kuber up for an announcement.
Good morning. My name is Laura Kuber, and I am the chair of the nominating committee. It's my pleasure today that on behalf of the committee, including Chris Brown, Karen Hutt, Lindy Spreetsma, Maya Thalman, and Alyssa Verson, to present the slate of candidates for the 2025 election. Biographies for these candidates are on the annual meeting page on our church website. This year, I'm pleased to announce that for board officer-elect to president, we are nominating Kat Gelder. For board trustee at large, Mara Southhorn. For member of the nominating committee, Steph Quirk, Bridget Coleman, and Laura Kuber. For more details, like I said, go find the webpage.
Thank you, Laura. Now, if you are online, I invite you to greet each other through the chat. And if you are present here, I invite you to turn to someone you did not come with and greet them with a wave and a good morning greeting.
Each of us was created in the image of love. Wherever we come from, wherever we going. Whoever we are, whomever we love. We proclaim with love on our side. Our bodies are sacred, our minds are blessed, our spirits are beloved. May we open to receive more love, always more love.
Good morning. Welcome to this place of love, this place of communal flourishing. We gather each week to open our hearts, to expand our minds, and to see the sacred within each other. This Sunday, the topic is the winner of the service auctions offering from last fall. Name Your Sermon is an offering that I placed on the auction, and DUC member Neil Lickman won. And he came to me with the very simple and easy topic of just war theory. Today's service will explore a bit about just war theory and some Unitarian Universalist history around the approach to war and to just cause. Yet this service is more than a philosophical approach. First, there will be no answers in this service. We Unitarian Universalists believe in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. In this situation of war and conflict, one must approach it from a personal level. What does your conscience demand of you? But also from a communal level. How am I protecting the most vulnerable amongst us? And most importantly, how am I living my values, showing up as a person of integrity, and living my faith in the world? This is an exercise today in both individual choice and conscience, but also collective choice and responsibility. And we will not have answers for you. But I do hope that today's service stimulates some thinking about the topic, because the second reason that this service is so important is that our nation is meeting all of the prerequisites for authoritarianism. This is not new. There is no point in our history as a nation where this was not a possible trajectory. At some points, of course, more strongly than others, like at this particular moment. However, it is possible that we may have to make decisions that we may never have thought of before, or even considered ever making. And so today, I invite you into a place of curiosity, a place of contemplation. I invite you to consider your convictions, your truth, the values that we hold as a community together, and listen to the voices of those who are most marginalized. Come, let us worship together.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing hymn number 348, Guide My Feet.
Please join me in reading our mission statement together. We gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world towards fairness, love, and compassion.
Our vision of beloved community is rooted in the relationships that we have with each other, our world, and creation. Each week we offer the opportunity for our joys or concerns to be shared aloud here from the pulpit. Today's flowers were given by Sharon Vance in honor of the dreamers who dare to envision a better world. Dreamers like this community. I have a joy from Chris Squirrel, who graduated from the University of Illinois at Springfield, summa cum laude with a 4.0 GPA. Congratulations, Chris. And I have a concern from Karen Peck. I'm concerned about a child in District 203 schools who is being bullied for being trans and playing sports. Attacks are coming from local hate group. Protect the people, especially children, who are being demonized because of who they are. Yes, indeed. And there is a call to show up tomorrow to the D203 school board if you feel so moved, to just show up in solidarity to support all those children who just need to be loved for who they are. And finally, I have one more sorrow to share with those of you who have not yet heard. Former member Elsie Mills passed away this past week. She was here for a very, very long time and ran our coffee hour for many, many years single-handedly, and has moved on to California and their Walnut Creek UU Church. But I know her impact made such a huge difference in this congregation. Stay tuned for news about the memorial service. Whether your joy or concern is said aloud here or held in your heart, know that we care for one another. Know that you can always reach out to our pastoral ministries associates or myself for a listening ear or for someone to celebrate with you. We are a caring community, and we wish to care for you. I invite you for a moment of silent meditative prayer.
It is time to gather, and I would like to invite all the young people to come join me up front here, and any young at heart can join us too. So I have a story. Long ago, in the bustling city of Berlin, Germany, lived a boy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. His house was always full of laughter, clinking dishes, and most of all, music. Dietrich's mother played the piano, his brother plucked violins, and little Dietrich sang with a bright, clear voice that carried down the hallway like sunshine. Now, while other children dreamed of becoming train engineers or circus stars, Dietrich had two great wishes: to understand God's love and to share that love with the world. He decided that when he grew up, he would become a pastor, someone who teaches, comforts, and reminds people of goodness. As Dietrich finished his studies, dark clouds rolled across Europe. A leader named Adolf Hitler told loud, angry stories that blamed Jewish neighbors and anyone he called different. Some people believed those stories. Others, who were frightened, stayed silent. Dietrich looked at the new red and black flags fluttering over city streets and felt a knot twist in his stomach. If I keep quiet, he thought, who will speak for my Jewish friends? Who will speak for the children who are pushed aside? So he lifted his gentle, steady voice, and from pulpits and radio stations he said, every person is precious. We belong to one another. Hurting others is wrong. Soon, Dietrich's church was told to preach only what the government allowed. No talk about kindness to Jews, officials warned, but Dietrich refused, and because of his courage, he was forbidden to teach in public. But did he give up? Nope, not for a minute. Instead, he gathered small groups of students in hidden houses beside wind-blown fields, and together they read the Bible, sang hymns softly, and practiced how can we help the least loved first. And they called this hidden classroom Finkenwald, and that's a picture of him standing outside of it. At night, the students blew out candles, tiptoed to the windows, and watched searchlights sweep the sky. And Dietrich would whisper, courage isn't loud, friends. Sometimes it is the quiet choice to keep loving when others tell you to hate. As the war dragged on, Dietrich learned of a secret plan to stop Hitler, a plan that included hurting him. And Dietrich believed stopping Hitler was necessary to save many lives, so he joined the conspiracy. But, and this is important, Dietrich never told himself that because my side is good, that everything I do must be considered good. Instead, he wrote page after page saying that no one sees right and wrong perfectly. Even when we act for justice, we must admit our actions can still cause harm. And I must beg God for forgiveness and keep a humble heart. Dietrich wanted children, like you, to remember that moral decisions can feel clear, but still be cloudy. Because whenever we think we see everything perfectly, we stop asking the hard questions, and that can be dangerous. And the secret plot was discovered, and Dietrich was arrested, and guards took his books, but they could not take his hope. And from prison, he slipped letters to friends that visited, and one letter said, because love guides us, we must keep questioning ourselves, even when we think we fight for good. His words fluttered beyond the gray walls, teaching that humility travels farther than hate. In April of 1945, just weeks before the war ended, Dietrich was led from his cell and never returned. His family wept, but they carried his letters across the world. So today, whenever someone speaks up for a classmate who is teased and yet still wonders, am I acting kindly? The seed of Dietrich's courage and his caution sprouts again. So I have some wondering questions. Have you ever been sure you were absolutely right and then discovered you missed something important? Yeah. What questions can you ask yourself to be sure your helping hands do not accidentally hurt someone or something? Are there questions that you can ask yourself to make sure that you're not hurting anybody when you're doing something that you think is good? Maybe just thinking, who does this affect? How does this affect them? How would I feel if I was the person that this was being done to? Or if I knew someone that this was being done to? So may your voice be clear, your heart be kind, your courage shine bright yet gentle, and may you always ask questions that keep love honest and the world more whole. So today, I'm going to take the kids with me during the singing of to the children. We have some activities that we're going to do out in Creeves Hall during the rest of the service. So the words are going to be a little bit different when you sing them. Let's sing to the children. You guys come with me.
St. Francis of Assisi shares the wisdom that it is in giving that we receive. Giving of our treasure is how we reciprocate the many gifts that are given by this community. Even in an uncertain world, we have so much to be grateful for: life itself, our planet, love, and each other. Giving is also how we live our values. Each month we share our offerings with an organization that gives life to these values and makes a difference in the world. The recipient of the May collection is the Unitarian Universalist Advocacy of Illinois. UUANI builds power among UU congregations in Illinois to accountably advocate for our UU values at the state, city, and local township levels. As we pass our offering plate, know that it is a vessel that connects us to each other through our gratitude and generosity. So give freely your thankfulness and abundance, that our values can forever take hold in the world. And before we start the music, a little introduction to the hymn that's going to be played during the offertory. The Battle Hymn of the Republic was written originally as a poem by Julia Ward Howe. Howe was a Unitarian whose name you likely recognize. She was the proposer of the original Mother's Day of Peace, which would morph into Mother's Day. She was an abolitionist, a suffragette, and a lifelong campaigner for justice. In November of 1861, Howe visited Washington, D.C. with her husband. As they made their way through the city, she often heard Union troops loudly singing a marching song called John Brown's Body, named after a famous abolitionist, John Brown. A preacher in their company challenged Howe to rewrite the lyrics of this in light of the Civil War. The prophetic biblical imagery invoked is inspired by Howe's Unitarianism that was heavily influenced by Transcendentalism. She believed in the Civil War's just cause to emancipate enslaved peoples and believed that God was on the side of the North. Of course, like every other part of this service today, this song has its complexities. If we examine the lyrics, which will be projected while it is played during the offertory, you will see the righteous anger and prophetic voice. But you will also see the philosophy of manifest destiny, that of white Europeans as God's chosen people as they conquer and subdue. Not only is this language powerful and righteous, as well as complex, the song itself has been co-opted because of that language. Simply the fact that most of the branches of our military use this hymn for both grandstanding and as a message of rightness and power is complex and worth exploring, not to mention the Christian rights claiming of this hymn, because the language lends itself to Christian nationalism. As the lyrics are projected, if you are so moved, feel free to sing along with the song.
I didn't think I'd start this with an ad lib, but first of all, thank you for agreeing to do that. When I was in boot camp on Sunday mornings when I had nothing to do, being ethnically Jewish, I would go to the Protestant service now and then at boot camp, and that was every Sunday morning, but I asked Mandy, please let us not do Onward Christian Soldiers. Good morning. I am Neil Lichtman, and as Reverend Mandy already told us, the winner in last fall's auction to conceive a Sunday service, the theme subject to Mandy's agreement. Our theme is Just War Theory, and I suspect many of you are wondering why in the world I chose this subject. My story begins when I was around 10 years old. At that age, based upon my naivety, I thought I was wise. And background playground chatter, I assumed my wonderful country fought wonderful wars and was undefeated. It took a course in U.S. history in college to know that around 1912, we fought a tie with English Canada when we tried to steal the Eastern Province. That was followed by a war we fought in 1812, which we did win, but it was not fought all that well. Of course, we Northerners thought the good guys won the Civil War, only to find out in William Faulkner's words, the Civil War might have ended, but it's not over. And although we won World War I, the Treaty of Versailles made that World War II was almost inevitable. And we could have won in Korea if we were not so greedy that when we took land very close to China, guess what? The Chinese army entered the war, and by the end of the war, well, we were back to where we began. It was a draw. I will leave aside distant wars like the Mexican-American War and the Spanish-American War and recent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and go directly to the war in Vietnam. Just short of graduating college, I received a draft notice and naively thought our war in Vietnam was indeed just. On leave from the Navy a couple years later, watching Senator Fulbright dismantle Secretary of State Dean Rusk on TV, I realized the opposition to that war just might be right. Years later, I read the Pentagon Papers and later H.R. McMaster's masterpiece, Dereliction of Duty, to find out that the highest-ranking members of the Pentagon played numerous war games and realized there was no way to either win the war and have the South Vietnamese accept us or win at all. Wondering for years which of our wars were justifiable and which were not compelled me to suggest to Reverend Mandy a service about just war theory. Turning to my years as a UU, I have chatted with both a UU president and a UU Service Committee president about going to war and have been surprised in both cases. They were not total pacifists. Soon you will hear from Reverend Mandy what she believes. But before concluding my remarks, here's a little about just war theory itself. It covers 1, going to war, 2, conducting war, and 3, concluding war, in each case justly or not justly. Just war theory is occasionally referred to as a tradition. It's not international law, but hopefully it functions as much as a restraint rather than misused to create permission to go to war. It's a subject that has drawn serious writings by names you know, like Cicero, Aristotle, Augustine, Aquinas, Luther, Kant, Reinhold Niebuhr, Martin Luther King Jr., and Pope Francis, and many names you probably don't know. But notice how many of those writers were major Western theologians. And since we gather as a religion, I thought it interesting that a religion, Catholicism, delivered such robust thinking about just and unjust war that it pretty much established what is today generally accepted theory. So I recruited our own Bill Kovacs, an attorney, but more importantly, a passionate student of Catholic canon law to discuss exactly that. And I will return after Bill to discuss some dissenters. Bill?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Neil asked me to contribute to his auction service because he knows that as a retired lawyer, one of my hobbies is Catholic theology. Let me explain. My mother's maiden name was Margaret Mary Martha McGahigan, as Irish Catholic as you could possibly be. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in a Catholic culture, and that meant Sunday school at St. Benedict's. Around 12, I started to have some doubts, but I still had to go to Sunday school. I learned Catholic writings that reflect over 2,000 years of genuine, sincere, intellectually rigorous efforts to explain human life. And warfare is part of human life. Personally, I'm a religious humanist. I'm good without God. But part of my religious identity today really includes all of that Catholic education. The fifth commandment, remember your commandments? No. The fifth commandment is, thou shalt not kill. But everyone knew that Christians were killing other Christians and killing lots and lots of other people all the time. Deadly warfare is the one constant in the history of civilization everywhere from the beginning until, unfortunately, now. Since killing was a fact of life, how could it be explained or justified? Is there a moral war consistent with the fifth commandment? The Catholic theologians said yes, there is, and developed an elaborate intellectual answer based upon Greek and Roman law precedents. St. Augustine in the 4th century said, love of violence is the worst sin. Around 1250, Aquinas presented the general outline of what is now known as just war theory. It's a plausible moral framework for war. Since Aquinas, hundreds and hundreds of books have been written on this subject. Quick summary. War is a physical contest between sovereign states. A little diversion into criminal law. If civilian A from America kills civilian B from Vietnam, it's murder. But if soldier A kills soldier B from Vietnam, in a declared war, it is okay if done in accordance with the rules. What are the rules? There are 3 sets of rules. One we call jus ad bellum, which is how do you start a just war? You should have a just cause, whatever that may mean. It should be the last resort. You've had negotiations and they haven't worked. It should be declared by a proper authority, hence democratic principles. Of course, you have to possess a right intention, have a reasonable chance of success so you don't unnecessarily kill people, and the end is supposed to be proportional to the means that's used. Secondly, there's a whole set of rules called jus in bello, which is how do you fight fairly? One example is you do not kill people who are wounded, you take them as prisoners. Third rule set, jus post bellum, what do you do after you win? The morally wrong loser is supposed to pay reparations, and another example is that citizens are supposed to be treated differently than soldiers. This is a very abstract list, so I'm to concretize it for you and see how these principles could be applied. I'm going to pick one of the most famous battles in English history, the Battle of Culloden in 1746 in Scotland, where the English totally ignored the principles of just war because they were fighting those mean Protestants. The losers were the Scots-Irish. Here, violation number 1, the principle of discrimination. The English troops killed those people who were wounded, and they also killed all the supporting civilians around who had provided things like food and bandages. Likewise, they ignored the principle of proportionality, because after they won the battle, clearly, they kept killing everyone left standing, so it was unnecessary. Any idea why I picked Culloden for my example? Many of the Scots-Irish emigrated to North and South Carolina. During our Revolutionary War, many Scots-Irish were in the Patriot militias, and their battle cry as they attacked the British redcoats was, "Remember Culloden." Maybe if England had not been so brutal in 1746, they might have won in America. Second practical example, reparations owned by the morally wrong loser. You'll notice if you lose, you're morally wrong. At the end of World War I, both sides knew this principle. Think about how different life in the 20th century would have been if Germany hadn't had to pay all those reparations. My conclusion: if deadly warfare is normal human behavior that is natural, inevitable, and will always happen, it would be far better for everyone if all wars were conducted in adherence to the just war principles that good old St. Aquinas thought through over 1,000 years ago. Thank you.
I return to share with you just a few select examples that challenge or amplify conventional thinking about just war theory and demonstrate that just war theory today is still very fertile territory and much may not be completely settled. But first, one of my favorite dissenters, adding to the rich thinking of Catholics, was a forgotten Spanish Dominican priest named Bartolomé de las Casas, who took on what I could only surmise were the governments of Portugal and Spain and their senior Catholic defenders of the massive devastation those empires wrought on the indigenous empires in the New World in the 16th and 17th century. He rejected the concept that forced conversion by threat of killing was justifiable, and he believed that Indians, as they were called back then, were capable of judging their own ideas of what's good, and the church should leave it at that, among other radical ideas he had. I suspect he had very little impact, but his thinking was right. What about Protestant theologians? Well, they array from those who are fully pacifistic to those who are labeled Christian realists. Here's the most mind-numbing thing I ran across among Protestants. One line of Protestant rationale maintains that just war against evildoers is a form of brotherly love. No, I did not make that up. Now here's a quite unconventional use of just war thinking. I and many of you witnessed a massive preemptive strike by Israel in 1967, immediately after Egypt's President Nasser closed an Israeli port, a small act of war on Nasser's part. Well, as much as that preemptive attack by Israel on Egypt and Syria is in the literature seen as justified, what I do want to impart is a surprising twist on that story. 6 years later, President Anwar Nasser of Egypt repaid Israel with an attack which he knew he would eventually lose. But its initial success, as Sadat calculated, would win respect from Israel. Just war theory maintains you do not go to war if you know you're going to lose. But in this case, Sadat knew he could accomplish a deep attack into Israeli-held territory before losing, and Israel would recognize that the Egyptian army and Egypt itself was now respectable. And in defeat, Sadat leveraged that to propose peace before the Israeli Knesset. The final agreement has led to 51 years of peace between Egypt and Israel to date, but Sadat and Rabin paid for that peace treaty with their lives. Ready to be scared? Perhaps the scariest use of just war theory was justification for using nuclear weapons. If you read or have heard of Herman Kahn's 1960 book, Thinking the Unthinkable, and later Henry Kissinger's take on the subject, just use of tactical, that small theater, nuclear weapons was debated, and some theorists arrived at just use scenarios for nuclear weapons. Are you ready for a problem from hell? That's the title of Samantha Power's book. The problem from hell is genocide. Some people whom you've expected to have been 100% pacifists supported U.S. military intervention in the Balkans in the 1970s and would have supported it in Africa to stop genocide. But when you ask whose troops must go, who might die to stop genocide, what genocide, you know it's not that simple. It is a problem from hell. And now here's a thought from the Vietnam era. Martin Luther King Jr. had a number of dissents, but he asked dissents about the war and about just war theory. But he asked if a nation can maintain just cause when it sends, by and large, its poorest citizens to fight and die, while its affluent citizens almost overwhelmingly avoid service for themselves. Thank you.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing hymn number 1028, Fire of Commitment.
Sets our mind
Unitarian Universalism is not a pacifist faith. While our history and strong support of nonviolence might lead folks to think we tend towards pacifism, we are not pacifists. Nonviolence is a legacy of our Universalist roots. It was the son of Hosea Ballou, the great Universalist preacher and theologian, Aidan Ballou, who first articulated nonviolence from a philosophical perspective. It was Aidan's work that would influence Leo Tolstoy, Gandhi, and MLK Jr. It was nonviolence, actually, that led some of the Universalists of the 1800s to form utopian communities, a separatist movement to enact peace and harmony in a community setting. But not all Universalists were so deeply passionate about nonviolence. In fact, many believed in the just nature of the Civil War as a necessary means to end the violence towards enslaved peoples. This was even more true in the Unitarian tradition. You heard Unitarian Julia Ward Howe's Battle Hymn of the Republic. Theodore Parker, the great Unitarian abolitionist, minister, and suffragette supporter, would write his sermons on a desk that now sits in my partner's office at Meadville Lombard Theological School, a desk that held in its drawer his pistol in the event that those who had given him death threats for his work on abolitionism decided to act on those threats. Both faith traditions struggled with how to enact their faith in the face of not only injustice, but in the face of violence and harm. And that struggle continued well into the 20th century through the merger of the denominations into the civil rights era. In fact, when MLK sent the telegram to all religious leaders asking them to come to Selma, Alabama, a telegram that I've actually held in my hands as I did archival work at my previous congregation, our churches and our ministers were split. Many churches refused to support ministers who wanted to go. Some ministers didn't want to go and lost their jobs when their churches thought they should. If we cannot even agree on what is a moral and just cause, would it even be possible to become a pacifist congregation? I doubt it. And that was about a nonviolent movement. Well, we say nonviolent, and it was on the part of those for whom history would show had the moral high ground. But the civil rights movement itself was very violent, and that is why countering with nonviolence worked. While history has proven that nonviolence works well, it has also shown that it only works well in situations where violence is on the opposing side. In moments when violence is tempered, less physical or hidden, such as in the case of Occupy Wall Street, it is shown that nonviolent action does not hold as much power. I'm not saying that protesting is ineffective, but it has its limitations, and we need to be honest about that. In some cases, protesting is about solidarity and community more than expecting a change. We can see in the history of conflict and war that the questions around what is moral and just are huge, deeply personal, and life-changing. And we've not even ventured into the territory of what is actually considered war. Too often, I've heard comments such as a just conflict or a just war is where the people with the moral high ground must not perpetuate violence. But that's just too simplistic. This whole discussion is often put into black and white categories. These are conversations that are nuanced and complex. The conversations and their answers live in areas of gray. When George Floyd was murdered by police, I was a ministerial intern. While the protests were happening, the congregation was split as to whether to give sanctuary to those who were rising up. Some named the destruction of property as violent and immoral. Some asked how much property was worth in the face of human death. There are more questions than answers when we examine the lines of justice. Dietrich Bonhoeffer's complicitness in an assassination attempt on Hitler is an example of this. While he fully believed that Hitler needed to die and that it was necessary to save many lives, he also believed that it was murder and that murder was wrong. It's really easy to stand in absolutes, naming the immorality of abusive power, but it is an act of integrity to honor the in-between, the gray space that means standing in the crossroads where the response to immorality may be a form of immorality itself. Do I believe there has ever been a just war? No. Necessary war? Yes. We needed to go to war to end the genocide of Jewish peoples. Ending genocide is always just, but the means by which genocide is ended may not be. Most importantly, preventing it in the first place is the most just thing. If Western powers had not fined Germany into recession, to Bill's point, after World War I, if we had maybe intervened prior to Pearl Harbor, maybe we might consider World War II to be just and whether we were on the right side of a just war. But I cannot call World War II just when there are so many things that could have prevented prior to the war. I believe that it is more than time to intervene to end the genocide of the Palestinian people. But the just thing would have been to prevent the genocide in the first place. There is more than one way that could have happened, including going all the way back to World War I and the recession, maybe even before that. And that includes collectively healing the trauma of people who have experienced genocide. The weeks prior to our 2024 presidential election, these were actually the thoughts and questions that were floating through my mind. More specifically, where is the line of just action for me, especially as a person of faith and as a minister? I've been reading lots of Bonhoeffer, Tillich, James Luther Adams, theologians and ministers of World War II in the hopes of maybe finding an answer. I've also been digging into Abraham Heschel's work, a Polish-American Jew who was able to flee Europe just prior to the Nazis' invasion of Poland. Heschel's commentary on Jewish scriptures, especially the prophets, have helped me as I considered these questions. It was a small piece from Heschel's book, The Prophets, that has had the most profound impact on me as I thought about the concept of just war. Heschel writes this: "People think that to be just is a virtue, deserving honor and rewards, that in doing righteousness one confers a favor on society. No one expects to receive a reward for the habit of breathing. Justice is as necessary as breathing is, and a constant occupation." What I realized as I reflected on this is that we, like the Israelites that Heschel was writing about, have been more concerned with wealth, power, prosperity than justice, not realizing that we are drowning, unable to breathe. In each of the historical or current political scenarios of war or conflict, what we face is the reality that because we did not prioritize right action from the beginning, because we did not prioritize justice, just like we prioritize our breathing, we had to take extraordinary action after injustice had already happened. When we didn't prioritize the least of these in the easiest, simplest moments, we created the impossible moment, where the answers were conflictual and which required us to live in the space between right and wrong. That's not to say that if we prioritize justice as we do breathing, we would not be faced with difficult decisions. Of course we would. But justice that is as natural as breathing becomes so inherent we don't even have to think about it. That sort of justice is what makes the society we want to live in. It makes beloved community. If we had always breathed justice, maybe we would not be where we are right now. But we are. We're in the middle of a rising authoritarianism. We're in the middle of a war on hate. And while many of us may not yet be at the place to consider at the extreme what is just in the face of death, we are not that far off. It is time to reflect on where your line for just action is. It is time to think of what you are willing to risk. It is time to figure out how you find the balance of righteousness even in the contradictions. And it is likely that you will land in a place of contradictions, in a gray space, just like Bonhoeffer did, just like I am finding myself in most days. But just as vital as answering these questions is figuring out how you prevent needing to ask these questions in the first place. More important is to create a state of self in which justice is the default. Beloveds, are you breathing justice? How are you helping others breathe justice? And in fact, the answer to that question is likely what will be the answer to what is just action in the face of conflict. I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our final hymn. It's one of my favorite hymns. It is a rewrite of the Christian hymn, Be Thou My Vision, and it is a hymn that calls us to lift our eyes to the reality of the world and calling us to action. I invite you, beloveds, as you think about the line of justice for yourself, to talk with one another. And as you do so, to find the place that fits right with your soul. And then breathe. Breathe deeply. And make that place the place where you return to time and again for all people. before you leave, no, it's okay, Laura, don't go too far. Please join Bill and Neil in the Founders Room if you'd like to continue this discussion on just war.
Please join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish the light of this chalice, but not the light in our hearts. Until we meet again, may the warmth of our community carry you.